Welcome to Compound Insights, a podcast by CFA Society New York. I'm your host, Rob Rowan. Today we're talking about the latest in commercial real estate, and we decided to invite back someone from December's podcast, Rob Gilman. Rob is partner and leader of the real estate group at Anshin. He earned his bachelor's at the State University of New York, Oneonta. So welcome back to the podcast, Rob.
Rob, thanks for having me again.
Well, so this is an exceptionally interesting time to talk about commercial real estate as a whole, because people in the media are talking about everything but it. so I guess I'd like to start off with, sort of an important issue that people shouldn't maybe leave on the table a little bit is a lot of your clients' budgets, risk, and other types of models did not envision the interest rate level of that, where the expense level we're at, all that other stuff. So how are you advising them from a strategic perspective or even a tactical one to change their budgets or do other things to meet those challenges?
Sure. So, because most of my clients will go through annual budgets, not a 5-year budget. Some of those cost items, like interest rates, where they're going to be next year, especially if you do have a variable rate loan.
Right.
But it's more of the other costs that are in there. Insurance.
Yeah.
Although the increases aren't as large as they may have been the past couple of years, there's still big increases, and not until you go for your renewal where you know what that is. So, but just putting it in your model, some type of estimates, you could be off, an amount that could make a significant difference. But just trying to, the one good thing that when we work with our clients, and not that we give our clients information about other clients, but at least we understand what's going on in the industry. Where are other commercial clients, where their insurance renewals going? What's going on in real estate taxes?
Right.
That's always a big thing, especially locally. What's going on in the marketplace, because it seems that the landlords are the ones who are always funding everything, especially with real estate taxes. So, they look at it quite often. And in fact, now with many clients, it's the time that they're budgeting for 2025. 2026, they're starting early, seeing where things are, and really just reviewing, they know where their revenue should be.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, one big question is that the tenants are going to stay,
Right.
Renewals and, what increases they're going to get. But the expenses is an important component in that budgeting. So really reviewing and re-reviewing those numbers, because, you never know when there's going to be a change. And hopefully, with the interest rates, unless they have a debt that's coming due, which I'm sure we'll talk about shortly, you know what your rates are going to be, at least for the near term.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this creates a very exceptionally difficult perspective from any financial professional's view, because revenues remain uncertain. And for a lot of your clients, I would guess that insurance is in the top 5 of their expenses.
It's getting there. It's getting to be, a very, high number.
And real estate taxes are probably in the top 3, right?
That's probably even, 1 or 2.
Right. So when you have that much uncertainty over the primary drivers of your expenses and the primary driver of your revenues, that uncertainty magnifies.
Yeah, it means that you have to keep a closer watch, especially on some of these commercial properties where you're having some type of project that you have to do.
Right.
Do you need to add windows? Do you need to redo a floor? The common areas, do they have to be redone? Is a tenant moving out? And now you have all these costs.
Mm-hmm.
So now to build, if you're bringing in a tenant, you may have to pay a build out, or you may have to do the work yourself.
Right.
And when you're doing the work yourself, construction costs are going up, materials are going up, possibly with tariffs also increasing as it relates to that. So monitoring all those costs, it's more important than ever, to really monitoring it. And you can't just take a budget now and not look at it, for 12 months. You have to keep reanalyzing it and doing it almost quarter by quarter. My clients that have their debt that's coming due,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little more of a little more important for them to be analyzing all those costs to understanding how much debt can they get.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's a difficult question. And how promptly will they be able to get it, I presume, is one also, because the banks have kind of come and gone and shut down for little periods of time too. Do you think that's going to go on?
So it depends what size debt that you have. If you're 25 million or less, commercial banks are still looking at that.
Right.
Once you go 25 million and up, and some of the projects that we're working on, the debt's 200 million, 400 million, 500 million. You're not going to a traditional bank,
Right.
but maybe they take a piece of it. But
Right. It's multiple lenders.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
You go into some of these debt funds but you still have to worry about how much you can afford to pay on an annual basis.
Right. Right. And the multiple lenders might make that tricky also because you got a few of them. Right.
Yeah.
It's not as easy. Well, I mean, I guess one of the things that is also exceptionally interesting to me is we're kind of here in this weird spot in building valuations. As we are recording this, and I have to say this now for everything. It's July 8th, folks. Everything changes on like I say something on a podcast and it changes 24 hours later. We're recording this on July 8th. Now we're near the middle of 2025. A lot of people are hoping that this was the year that commercial real estate bottoms out. How are you working with clients in those buildings who are still sustaining losses? Do you think we're bottoming out here? Or is it still too early to call for 25?
Well, with the bottom, here's the issues. Nobody ever knows when the bottom is going to hit.
Sure, 5 years later they do.
Well, exactly. 5 years later. Listen, when the interest rates first started, decreasing, 15 years ago, everyone said it's short-lived. It's short-lived.
Yeah.
12 years later, the interest rates finally started going up.
Yeah.
So I find the same with commercial real estate because you have so many different sectors.
Mm-hmm.
And let's leave the rent-stabilized apartments on the side for now.
Great.
Because those valuations, it's an issue.
Let's come back to that. Yeah.
Okay. But on everything else, when you have the higher-end residential rental properties, those are doing quite well. Rents are going up. Valuations should be going up. Commercial real estate, for the most part, especially in New York, it's getting better. Now, we're not at the point where you can sit there and say that there's still some issues going on because the existing debt is predicated on that.
Right.
But I do see that the leasing activity in New York is increasing.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not to the point where I think most landlords would like it to be. If you take a look at where the rents are going, especially on the Class A properties, significant increases.
Yep.
So if rents are going up, although we spoke about costs going up,
right,
values go up.
Right.
Class B is starting to see that Class A is getting too expensive for some people that
yeah.
would have been, at the lower price, they would rather go into a Class A.
Right.
But as Class A gets too expensive, they go into the Class B. And I see when I read all the leases that are being signed, you're starting to see some of that next tier of properties. Now, again, it's still going to be predicated on the debt as to what people are going to need if they have to refinance, where those rents have to be. I think you have some landlords that when you take a look at having to refinance their properties, when they look at, the rent roll that they have, sometimes having a space that's open is more valuable than a space that's rented below the amount that they need. People see that, if the rents are starting to creep up, having $10 more per square foot over a 5 or 10 year lease increases the valuations. So going back to the question, have we hit the bottom? We may have.
Yeah.
Rent stabilized is it different because
let's talk about that now because that's a whole different thing. There's a little government involvement in that. So let's talk about that. So we're talking about multifamily rent stabilized.
We'll get back to the original question that we started talking about is the expenses.
Mm-hmm.
Expenses in those buildings are going up.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not changing. The insurance,
mm-hmm.
same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Real estate taxes. Yes, it's based on your rent roll, but still real estate taxes are going up. So all your costs are going up. And now you're told that if you have tenants moving out, again, you can't, increase the rents to where you would like them to be. The annual increases, originally they were expecting it was going to be between 5 and 7%.
Right.
And now it ended, 3 to 4%.
Yeah.
It's a big difference. So you're not getting the revenues to offset all your cost increases. Yeah, that's concerning. I think a lot of the lenders in that marketplace are very concerned on rent stabilized. You're now going in, what's it, 8 years since the rules had changed? The one concern that everybody spoke about when this rule had changed is what's going to happen to those buildings in 10, 15 years. It's not worth it for a landlord to put a lot of costs into a building. They're not getting a return for it.
Right.
So now you have those buildings getting older, and what work is being done? You have certain required work that you have to do, the
Right.
local laws.
And that is increasing, right? It has increased dramatically. The local laws have increased dramatically in the last couple of years also.
Correct.
So they don't even really have much of a choice to not do some work.
Certain work they have to do.
Right.
Not everything that's needed to go into a building, especially if you have a tenant moving out, how much you're going to put in, to
Right.
get a new tenant.
Right.
It's not worth what it used to be to spend $50,000, $60,000 to put into a building, sometimes more, because you got it back. You were able to raise the rents. Now that you can't. So that's the one market that I would tell you that I don't think we've hit the bottom.
Yeah, I think at the risk of becoming exceptionally local here in New York, one of the bigger issues for that is local law 11 or FISP, which unfortunately a lot of the buildings that have these rent controlled units in them also have a ton of bricks. and, and that is, the New York City Council, I believe, made some kind of effort to limit the amount of time that scaffolding can be up, which means that they're basically forcing DOB to do examinations more frequently.
Yeah, you go to the local law, it's the outside of a building.
Right.
So the outside of the building will look nicer, but you have the inside of the building.
Right.
And that's where if you take a look at some of these buildings, it's starting to get dated.
If you could wave your magic wand, regulatorily, practically speaking, prices, etc., what do you think would trigger to you that those types of properties, those rent stabilized multifamily units, are going to start going up?
First of all, it's a great question. Yeah, the problem is it's the revenue that they would have to start increasing the revenues. I'm throwing out 5% a year, 7% a year.
Yeah.
And we know that's going to be a big issue, getting the revenues that you need. So until you get the revenues, the offset would be if there's some type of reduction in real estate taxes.
Okay.
That let's just say they freeze rents.
Okay.
I hope we don't get there, but let's just say they freeze rents.
Right.
You better do something with the real estate taxes, because if you're not getting any more income, but your costs are going up, you're now making the problem worse, which means that the values of the buildings are even going to go down. So I'm not sure where or when we will get to a point where we can say the rent stabilized market has hit bottom. It's easy to say that all the current owners of rent stabilized, they've lost their money. They have no equity left.
Right.
They have debt. They'll trade the building.
Uh-huh.
So at some dollar amount, a building is worth something.
Right.
And the bottom may be when all these properties, whether they get foreclosed on because of the debt, or there's forced sales, whatever that new valuation is, which could be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of where they are now. Nobody knows.
Right.
So I don't know when that will happen, when we've hit the bottom, but the revenue is going to be a key component in that.
Okay. And all those things would take a while, right? Because the foreclosure process, this is a judicial state. Most of the northeastern ones are judicial. That's a start your clock at 2 years, right? So, it takes a while to do all those things. And, the other thing that makes it difficult to some degree for a lot of cities is they have capital improvement budgets that need to get filled somehow.
Yeah.
So it's exceptionally interesting. Now, let's just shift a little bit to the, well, before we get on that, do you see anything interesting happening in any other sectors? There have been some incentives for server farms, so I wonder if you see, what you see in that anywhere else in any other subsectors.
Well, the data centers are starting to, grow a little bit again, where there's a lot of companies that were in different sectors that have now got into the data center space. I see that continuing to grow. Listen, storage facilities, especially locally, there's still not enough storage here.
Right.
The going back to residential, there's a lot of people that want to live here. You may not go to the office, but they want to live here, and you need space. And some of the apartments, the way that, if you take a look at where the rents are going, again, leaving the rent stabilized out of it, the regular marketplace, people need to live in smaller spaces to be able to afford the rent.
Right.
Smaller spaces means less storage, which means you need somewhere to store some of your stuff. So I still think storage facilities is a sector that can, still be very profitable.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And storage facility production has been lagging demand for some years, right? It's generally speaking, it's done
locally, yeah,
local
yeah,
levels,
yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. All right, let's shift to the federal level for a minute. Do want to go to the headlines, even though I often eschew them on this podcast, but we'll go for it anyway. There's a pretty massive reduction in IRS budgets, and it's probably going to end up with some staff reduction. Do you think that means anything to commercial real estate holders?
Well, I'll first say for everybody, those reductions, 25, 30%, that doesn't mean you don't have to file your taxes anymore.
No, I don't mean that.
No, but what's funny is
that's the law.
I've been asked, not by my clients, I've been asked from people. They'll be like, "Oh, now that the IRS has nobody working for them, I don't have to file my taxes." The answer, you still have to file your taxes.
Yeah, that's law.
There are still people working at the IRS. I think where we're going to see some effect, maybe not so much on most real estate is owned by flow-through entities.
Right.
So there's no federal taxes at the entity level.
Right.
It's at the individual level.
Right.
Getting refunds, I believe, may take
a
a little bit longer to get your refunds.
Mm-hmm.
When you have an issue, whether it's an audit or maybe you've been hit with an assessment that you're trying to argue your case, that's going to take a little bit longer.
Right.
And I'm already seeing more computer-generated notices than in the past that they're not accurate,
right?
But it takes time to resolve them, and you have to address them. So when you look at just how it affects, commercial real estate, it's the same thing. There's always filing issues that you have to potentially deal with. And if there's a tax position that was taken that you may have to argue, your case and give the fact, it's just going to take longer and longer. I think the biggest effect is going to be on the individuals that are waiting for their refunds.
Right.
And, because, that 25% reduction, from what I hear, it's not across the board 25%.
No,
there are certain areas that they're taking off. So if you need to get in contact with someone to the IRS, if you were waiting an hour in the past, maybe you wait 3 hours now to get a hold of somebody. Everything's computerized now.
Mm-hmm.
So all those audits, which in the past you used to get a letter saying you're being audited, we're coming to the house, that doesn't happen anymore.
Right, I know.
Yeah, they're asking, send me the backup for, X, Y, and Z, and let's see what you have and, your position. But sometimes these cases just go, they dragged anyway. Mm-hmm. Now it's just going to drag a little bit longer. So we have to wait and see. But, in the long run, the IRS still has plenty of people. The number of audits may be reduced, which I guess you can say is a good thing. They're just not going to have, yeah. They just don't have they're not going to have the manpower to do the number of audits. And, people are thinking that only means once your income is a certain amount, you're going to be able to, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's definitely not accurate. It's the audit lottery.
Well, what's the old trick that people say? If you pay estimated taxes, your risk of audit is lower.
There's so many things.
I've heard all these things.
If you don't file an extension, your risk of audit is less. Right. Meanwhile, less people get audited that file extensions than file. Yeah, the estimates, as long as if I pay them, I had a client that once said, I want to overpay them in April. I don't mind waiting for the money. I just want them to think. I said it doesn't work that way.
No. They'll clip the coupon and send it back to you.
Exactly.
Basically.
Yeah. They'll take a look at your tax return. They don't look at when you made the payments.
Right. Yeah. It is one of those things, but it does seem interesting that to me that it might strike some of the owners of real estate assets more because of the complexity of their tax problems. Because they always took a while because they were complex. They had to kick it up to an IRS lawyer, and there's maybe a court case. So that could take much longer.
Yeah, when you talk about sectors when dealing with the IRS, I happen to find that on the real estate side, on the operating side, that a lot of other industries have bigger issues with the IRS. Technology with R&D
Right.
credits, that on the real estate side with depreciation, you
Right.
bought a building,
Right.
you know what the building is. Yeah, again, sometimes you do a cost seg to be able to get faster depreciation,
Yeah.
but the rules are the rules.
Right.
It's
It's a
when
table. Right.
correct.
Yes.
It's when you may have a complicated transaction,
Hmm.
selling a building, doing a 1031,
Hmm.
buying out some of your investors because other investors want to stay in the deal. That's where there can be issues, and that's why it's important. And one thing that we do with our clients now, before they're selling a building, we start talking about all that as to what you want to do once you sell the building. And if everything is done properly in the beginning,
Okay.
you're not going to have the issues
Hmm.
down the road.
Hmm.
Some of the cases that we're getting involved with now, we were not their accountants when they sold the building and were doing a transaction. And again, that's where you have issues because it wasn't done proper.
Right.
And there might be ways to resolve or minimize some of the exposure. That's where it's going to take longer and longer to get people, and there's not enough agents, and it's just going to take longer to resolve some of those. So the issue that a commercial real estate owner would have, it's taking longer, and a lot of times you want to get these resolved as soon as possible because you may not do another deal because you want to wait to see what happens, with your existing deal.
Right. And that could slow recovery also because holding up those deals that might be the thing that gets some of the volume moving could be an overall issue for the
Could be,
market.
yeah.
Right? So, yeah, that is exceptionally
I mean,
interesting. Well,
transactions are happening.
yeah. Yeah, but a lot of them are kind of big and sort of marquee
Yeah,
buildings, right?
yeah, yeah. Which, listen, somebody's taking putting money into deals. I mean, there's a lot of development that's going on. With the new bill, the opportunity zones came back, so there's
Yeah.
going to be a lot more development. There's a lot of good things, in the new bill that I would think will help commercial real estate owners.
Yeah. I mean, and, you know, it's exceptionally, to me, it's kind of interesting to look back at when there were things like opportunity zones in the past. Some of those processes took a real long time to have an impact, but they had a magnificent impact on like a place like Pittsburgh, from the 80s till now. It's a magnificent impact on those places.
There were certain areas that, and listen, that's what the program was put in for,
Hmm.
is to help build up areas that needed it. So it was successful in many areas. And I think the changes that they made, it's not so easy, you're not, there's no opportunity zones in areas that don't need it. It's all in areas that it's needed. But, you know, you talk about growth, and there's a lot of areas that growth, it keeps expanding that you need to build.
Yeah.
So now if you can build in areas that, really need that, that have been struggling, it's a great program. And now it's just going to be able to allow people to defer money and get all those opportunities on benefits, which are significant tax benefits at the end of a deal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's well, we don't get to end these on a positive note, so let's end it there.
Okay.
So thank you, Rob, for being here again.
Rob, thanks for having me again.
If those of you who are listening to this are also a little bit concerned, as I know a lot of people in financial services are about their jobs and the pressures on that, please consider attending CFA Society New York's second annual Outsourced CIO event on July 21st. It features the CIOs of BNY and Wells Fargo, and you can sign up for that on our website and get some good networking done after that with a big crowd. So hope to see you all there. Until next time, I'm Rob Rowan, and this has been Compound Insights.